If you're watching this on the website or floated by on YouTube, a very warm welcome. My name is Roly Lees Oakes, and in this presentation we're going to look at an introduction to adult attachment. The first person we're going to look at is John Bowlby, a British-born psychiatrist who researched child development at London's Tavistock Clinic in the late 1940s. In 1949, Bowlby was commissioned by the World Health Organization to write a report on the mental health of homeless children in post-war Europe. The result was Maternal Care and Mental Health, and it was published in 1951. This publication was highly influential, causing widespread changes in how children were looked after when living in an institutional care setting. And John Bowlby is considered the father of attachment theory. His theories are still used today in the world of social work, psychology, child psychology, psychotherapy. So his theories are still very current and very relevant. Mary Aisworth was a colleague of John Bowlby's. She was a research psychologist who in the 1970s expanded upon Bowlby's original work. Her groundbreaking Strange Situation study revealed the profound effects of attachment on child behaviour. In the study, researchers observed children between the ages of 12 and 18 months as they responded to a situation in which they were briefly left alone and then returned with their mothers, returned to their mothers. So let me have a look at the characteristics of attachment. There's four pillars to it. One is secure base. The second is proximity maintenance. The third is safe haven. And finally, separation distress. And in the next slide, I'm just going to go through what those mean and just try and give you some real world examples to underpin the theory. So the key ideas of Bowlby's were secure base. So the attachment figure acts as a base of security from which the child can explore the surrounding environment. So if we're thinking about the shopping mall or we're thinking about an amusement park, we see a small child with their parents or caregivers. They'll run around exploring the world, but they will come back to their parents or attachment figures, caregivers, as a secure base. And you see children will separate themselves so far from their parents, and then they'll run back very quickly and connect with them again. And that children need a secure base. They need to know they're protected and loved in their world, and that's what a secure base is. Proximity maintenance, the desire to be near the people we are attracted to. For those of us who've had small children or experience of small children, maybe 12 months, maybe 15 months old, we know that if we leave the room, sometimes they believe that we've just disappeared forever. That's because children at that age don't have the capacity to understand that we can be in another place near them, even if they can't see us. So that is why parents play hide-and-peek games to teach their children that they can still be there even if the child can't be seen. That's why we play hide-and-peep. That's why people play hide-and-peep. And also, if you've got to go into another room, maybe to make a cup of coffee, and you've got the child in one room, parents talk to the child, I'm only in here, I'll be back in a few seconds. You okay? So the child constantly can hear the caregiver, and that's an example really of proximity maintenance. The idea that the child is looked after, feels looked after in their world. Safe haven, returning to the attachment figure for comfort and safety in the fear or the face of fear or threat. Well, again, thinking of the shopping mall, thinking of the amusement park, if a child is running to explore these wonderful things they may be seeing when they're out and about, sometimes they get startled or a little bit spooked by what they see, and then they'll run back and they usually grasp on to the caregiver's leg and hide behind them. And that basically is safe haven. They're returning to the bigger person, the person who they expect will look after them and comfort them and keep them secure in their world. Separation distress, anxiety that occurs in the absence of an attachment figure. Any parent who's ever dropped their child off for the first time at daycare, child nursery, or at school knows the pain of hearing their child cry and not want to be left, and that's separation distress. And And what usually happens is that the child will get upset for a short period of time and then will basically get on with what they have to do. And there has been some research done in the late 1960s by Schaefer and Emerson, who believed that children form multiple attachments, so that they're able to attach to any figure that offers them security and kindness and love. So that's separation distress, that horrible crying sound that parents hear when they drop their child off for the very first time at daycare. Some children don't cry, I have to say, but some do. So those are the key ideas of attachment. What we're going to look at is the different forms of attachment, and then go on to have a look at how early attachment in children, our early childhood behaviour, may influence how we go on to live our lives as an adult. So first of all, we're going to look at Ainsworth's strange situation assessment, how she worked out different attachment styles. So what they did was they got a room with a one-way piece of glass so that the researchers could see into the room, but anybody in the room couldn't see out. And the parent and the child are alone in the room. So the parent and the child go into the room and they're alone. The child explores the room with parental supervision. So within this room were interesting things like toys and cuddly things that the child could have a look at and get interested in, pictures and stuff like that. The stranger enters the room and talks to the parent and the child. So a stranger comes in at this point, talks both to the parent and the child. The parent quietly leaves the room, and then the parent returns and comforts the child. Now, of course, when the parent leaves the room, the child would have got upset. May have got upset. Not all of them did, but may have got upset. And then when the parent returns and comforts the child, it's at that point Mary Ainsworth's researchers and herself could make an assessment on what type of emotional connection the child had with the parent. And she broke it down into different types of attachment styles, and we're going to look at that in the next slide. So the types of attachment styles are secure, ambivalent, and avoidant. So those are the three attachment styles that Mary Ainsworth and her researchers identified in the 70s. However, in the 1980s, 1986, another one was added called disorganized attachment, and that was identified by researchers Main and Solomon. And we're going to discuss how all of these attachment styles, how our early childhood experiences, our early view of how we're cared for in our world, may influence how we behave and how we live our lives as adults. So let's have a look at the characteristics of secure attachment. Now, secure attachment is considered what would be called a healthy attachment. So as I go through these attachment styles, I will show you what happens as children and what may happen as adults as a consequence of the type of attachment style a child has. So as children, if we're able to separate from a parent, as adults we'll probably have a trusting, lasting relationship. If we seek comfort from parents when frightened and more to the point get it back, we'll tend to have high self-esteem as adults. If we greet the return of a parent with positive emotions, well, as adults we'll probably be comfortable sharing our feelings with those who are close. And finally, if we prefer parents to strangers as children, as adults it's very likely we'll seek out social relationships. So when we're talking about secure attachment, we're talking about what would be considered a healthy attachment as a child. And as you can see, healthy attachment as a child equals healthy relationships as adults. But sadly, for some children, this isn't the case. So we're going to look at different attachment styles other than this healthy one. So the first one we're going to look at is ambivalent attachment. So as children, if we're distrusting of strangers, we may be reluctant to be close to others. As children, if we become over distressed when a parent leaves, then it's possible as adults we'll worry that we're not loved by our partners. If we do not appear to be comforted when our parents return as children, then it's possible we become distraught when the relationship ends. So that's one attachment style. There's another called avoidant attachment. So as avoidant attachment is, as children, we may avoid our parents, hence the name avoidant attachment. And as adults, we could have problems with intimacy. So if we're avoiding those caregivers who are really teaching us how to be intimate and caring in our world, if we haven't developed those connections as children, and as adults, we would probably have or could have difficulty with intimacy. Does not seek much contact with parents as children. Well, it may be as adults we invest little in social or romantic relationships. So there's a correlation, there's a connection between how we feel we're loved as children and how we connect with our caregiver to how we may grow up as adults. Shows no preference for parents over strangers. As children, as adults, we may be unwilling or unable to share thoughts and feelings with others. So as you can see with this attachment style, avoidance, the whole point of it is avoiding. So as adults, we may avoid intimate relationships, find them very difficult. The final one's disorganised attachment. Now this was developed by Maines and Solomon in 1986. So consequently, this is reasonably new in attachment theory. So as children, we may seem dazed or confused, and as adults we may tend to have a distorted view of others. Now we started off with a attachment style which was healthy. This is a very unhealthy attachment, disorganised, and it's usually connected with children who've had either physical or emotional abuse. So, you know, children who have had that kind of abuse can seem dazed or confused. And they grow up into adults and they may have a distorted view of others because they've never had the ability to trust others because others have just been abusive to them. They may see the world as an unsafe place as children, so they may have trouble socially or struggle using others to co-regulate their emotions. So I guess the position would be is that everybody else isn't okay and neither are them. They're not feeling safe in the world. So if you can imagine a world where you just don't feel safe at all emotionally, then you have an idea of what a disorganised attachment is. Interestingly enough, disorganised attachment is linked to personality disorder. So people with very disorganised attachment styles may have an incredibly distorted view of the world. One of the things they may do is talk about people who have died as being alive. Certainly their caregivers, they may actually talk about them actually as they exist. So they have an incredibly distorted view of their world. Let's have a look at attachment, parenting and resultant adult characteristics. Now this is a broad brush kind of graph that I've put together, but it gives you an idea of how parenting affects children and how that effect then goes on and ripples along into their adult life. So if someone's had a secure attachment, and remembering that a secure attachment is an attachment that is really, really healthy between a parent or a caregiver and a child. So a secure attachment, they're in tune with the child's emotions. So they're able to see pain and difficulty in their children and work with that and respond to it appropriately. And as a result, as adults, we're able to create meaningful relationships, be empathic and set boundaries in our lives. So the secure attachment is a healthy attachment. The ambivalent attachment, parenting may be inconsistent and intrusive. Parents being inconsistent, giving love and then withdrawing it, being very intrusive into the children's lives, not giving a child privacy, that type of thing can end up with a adult being anxious and insecure, tend to blame, control, but they can be very charming people, but they're very unpredictable. Avoidant attachment, the parents are rejected and unavailable. So they avoid, as an adult, they may avoid emotional connection, can be critical, distant and intolerant. And finally, disorganised attachment, ignored or didn't see the child's needs, the parenting style, or they can be frightened and abusive. And the resulting adult characteristic is chaotic, insensitive, explosive, untrusting, even while craving security. So think of a situation, think of it like this with disorganised attachment. You've got someone who desperately needs love and meaning in their life, but just can't accept it in themselves and can't ask for it in others, just can't ask for it in others. So, how frightening is that? Very, very frightening. And sometimes, as I said, with disorganised attachment, it can be seen in the realms of personality disorder. It can also be seen and misdiagnosed, from what I've read, as psychosis. So it can be really, really difficult for some people with disorganised attachment. The research on disorganised attachment, and now I've got this piece of research from communitycare.co.uk, and I think it's really, really interesting, because I always get asked the question: are abused children who are abused, will they go on to be abusers? So I found out some current research, 2008, so reasonably current. So from current research, if we were to track 100 maltreated children who later became parents, about 30 will go on to harm a child of their own. And that research was done by Crittenden in 2008, leaving 70 who will not. They go on to write, the problem for social workers, and indeed anybody in the field of psychology or counselling or psychotherapy, is that we only come into contact with the 30 who do. And to them it appears consistent that children who are abused themselves are more likely to become abusers of their own children. So it gives an indication, and you'd have to look at the research to indicate what the research sampling was and the studies, but it gives us an idea, and I'll put that link in the bar below. Finally, it's worth noting that attachment styles can alter over time and can vary depending on the life experience of the individual. So the journey from childhood to adulthood is one of experience, and it's one of, hopefully, connection. So it's possible that even someone who's had a very difficult time as a child can find through experience and connecting with people that their attachment styles can vary and alter. And certain attachment styles are nuanced. Some people may have difficulty with some types of people and not others. So that's in the area of transference, and there's a video on the site about transference. However, for some who as children have had lengthy abusive or distorted relationships with their caregiver, attachment styles may become fixed, and accessing therapy is a way of facilitating change. So if you get someone who's had a constant difficulty with relationships because of mistrust, it may be that that individual at some point in their life thinks, I really can't go on just living this way. They go and seek therapy, and the therapist explores their timeline of childhood and can help that individual, or client as they would become, see how early childhood interaction has affected and influenced the adults they've become. If you want further information, well, if you're watching on the YouTube, click the links below for more resources. And why not visit us on counsellingtutor.com. Follow the red arrow to the link box in the bottom, and I'll put some links in, both to the resources and to counsellingtutor.com, the website. And finally, as always, thank you for watching.